I'd like to now invite on the stage Jenny Chen, who will be moderating this roundtable with all of our experts. So please come back to the stage. Jenny Chen, Jessica Ziske, Luis Alvarez, Jay Yu, Pedro Martinez Cejas, Michael Witterman. Let's see. I'll help too. So we can take advantage of all the minutes that we have for this. Just have a seat. Thank you. Perdón. Perdona. Micro?
We're running a little behind, so I'm going to save most of my questions, but just asking one question that I think is going to save a lot of people money. Everybody here talked a little bit about regulatory concerns, so I just hope that the speakers can give some advice to the audience of some of any form, either from an investor perspective or a bioprinting perspective. From the regulatory perspective, do you have any suggestions for the audience?
Well,
Go ahead.
one thing that I like to see entrepreneurs do and CEOs as they're going and throughout the process is really take notes of whatever flags everyone has given you. When you walk around conferences, when you ask people about how they're dealing with their regulatory, what paths you can get. There's a lot of free advice you can get from other companies. And when investors or other subject matter experts give you a potential flag, make sure you've gone through and written that down. One of the favorite things I like to see CEO or companies do is actually have a frequently asked questions regarding FAQs. It's typically deep in the diligence room. They only give it to me if I request it. But it's a frequently asked questions around the process that really shows that people have asked them questions and how they've responded.
Luis, do you have any?
Yeah, so one thing I was going to say for some of the new products that are coming out now, engineered replacement tissues, vascular grafts, skin, things like this, that the regulatory agencies haven't seen these things before, and a lot of times it's the company that has to educate the agencies, whether it's EMA or FDA. What is little known and often underutilized is the ability to go in and present in a way that you're not asking for review of your product, you're simply informing and educating the agency. So it's something that I would encourage even startup companies that have interactions with the regulatory agencies to go and present their new technologies, because these agencies need to be educated on what's coming up. And in fact, it only helps the industry as a whole for those agencies to know what the cutting edge is. So I would encourage that type of interaction with the agencies. It can be frightening, but we shouldn't be intimidated by them. Yeah.
Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, I'm going to add to that one of the things that Oprisha did fairly well is approaching the agency and having that dialogue. But I think one of the things that really helped was really preparing for it. So that you had anticipated all the questions and also had the answers to the questions that would be asked. So when you go into the agency with proposed solutions, rather than just asking them, what do you think? Where you can actually have a very open-ended discussion, rather than having that. If you have very clearly outlined and data to support your approach, that can help you get through that process very successfully.
Michael, do you have anything to add?
Sorry?
Do you have anything to add to the conversation?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Do you have anything to add to the conversation? Or Pedro, do you have anything? From a surgeon's perspective.
Yes, by a surgeon, the regulatory is very important. In Europe, and USA, the responsibility is only the surgeon that put the prosthesis in the patient. And the use of the biomodel is over the MD. Now there is a new regulatory in Europe that will be now soon. It's I think.
Okay. Well, because we have limited time, I'm going to open up to the audience to ask questions. Okay, that gentleman over there. Do you have a mic over there?
Hello, I'm Ivan Rosales from a company called B. Brown. I have a question regarding, it's also regulatory because, there's a new regulation that will be implemented this year and the next, that is the MedDev. Regarding to this new regulation where the clinical evidence of the medical devices that are produced, how do you see custom-made products with this new regulation that is more strict than the past one regarding to this issue? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's more difficult to put a prosthesis in a patient now, but the processes will be regulatory, but the enterprise that print the prosthesis might be certified, the machine will be certified, but in the last, only the surgeon has the responsibility.
Any other questions? Okay, I have another question because I have a lot of questions for you guys. And this is an open-ended question. You can feel free. What are the major challenges that you are facing with your own work in this space right now? And I'll just go from Pedro and then go down the row.
The chances of 3D printing in my work and the problems I see is that there is a lot of medicine that don't has the knowledge for improve this technology. We must create an ecosystem for this way. Engineers, medicine, enterprise, patients, everybody has something to talk and has a lot of things for improve the 3D printing. 3D printing bring us the personalized surgeries, and it's a reality now. I think so.
For me, it is actually ties off to what you just said, which is when we look at the supply chain or the value chain of from imaging to the software, DICOM to the printer to the surgeon, each one of those individual steps is requiring innovation and disruption in this. And so I look at startups in each one of those individual areas, but until the whole thing is ready to go, it is hard to get traction in one of those. And so I think balancing that individual segment disruption versus looking at a full stack solution is a challenge that we're seeing.
Sure. So for us, since we're engaged in tissue engineering, regenerative medicine, the near-term challenges are more technical in nature and really relate to talent and finding the right type of people to work on these problems. So the field has grown quite a bit recently in bioengineering in general, and I want to continue to see that grow, but we're still finding that at the edges of that space, we do need more talent. So I think it's a workforce and training and education problem. Longer term is, what do you do with the thing you've made? Now you've made this amazing thing. Will the agency accept it? And what are the models you need? So there's a bit of work, I think, for us longer term to develop the right models to convince agencies that the thing is going to work, no matter what it is you make. Yeah.
All right, so my perspectives in pharmaceutical industry, we do have a lot of challenges. One of them is that there's a lot of overcapacity in pharmaceutical industry for manufacturing. So when you start to think about 3D printing as a way to manufacture products, it has to compete with tablet presses that can make hundreds of thousands of tablets an hour and costs less than a dime to make those. So how do you find the right types of products that cannot be done with the conventional technique? That's one of the biggest challenges. And the other, I'd like to actually talk about the future and challenges associated with it. A lot of people look at three-dimensional printing as a way to do personalized medicine and also perhaps print at home the medication that's required for each patient. And for that to become a reality, there are a lot of different challenges, including regulatory and safety and quality. But one of the key things that the industry really needs is an ability to analyze the products that you've made remotely. Currently, because the pharmaceutical manufacturing is done centrally, there are quality control labs that will actually take the products and test the batches and confirm that the batches that were made are good. But if you want to do that in a distributed mode or actually at home, you need to make sure that whatever the 3D printer makes is always good, and being able to confirm that the patients are getting the right dose, right release profile, and so on. So that is a big challenge.
For us as a producer, the next challenge will be to produce parts in a clean room under controlled environment and with FDA approved materials and a controlled environment like FBA and GMP. So this was the next step.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the audience? Okay. I have another question, and this is just a discussion. I have seen the hype cycle about 3D printing many times from many presentations, and everyone think that we're not in the hype cycle anymore. I just want to see, what is your perspective right now? How is this hype cycle still impacting what you do?
The impact in surgeons will be increasing in several months and several years. Began with complex cases, and after we will do more and more simple cases when the technology must be cheaper. The patience is the limit, I think so.
For me, in the hype cycle, we've got to specifically say what technology we're dealing with. If it's a metal printed implant, we may be very far along in the hype cycle. When we're looking at organs, we're not even an early adopter yet. So I really want to make sure we're segmenting on that trail. I actually, there's 15 billion put into healthcare last year in venture capital. The first half of 2018, there was about another 15 billion put in. And 3D printing is like a tiny, tiny segment of that. So until we actually see, for me, the hype cycle is usually, we're not in the pie chart yet of the hype cycle for the venture capital. Now we do see companies like Invisalign in the dental side that I think are through the hype cycle, they're getting the adoption, but we're still very, very early.
Thank you.
I would say that in managing this, it's easy to be distracted by interesting technology, but if you focus on the core problem, a fundamental problem, and you keep your focus on that, then no matter what technology waves come along, you can exploit them. It's almost like surfing. If you know how to swim, you will survive and you'll be able to address that problem. When the next wave comes along and you can catch it, that's where your success will come in using that particular tool. So 3D printing in of itself isn't the end. It's a tool that we use to solve a fundamental problem. So I always think, focus on the fundamental problem and then search what technologies you can harvest to address that problem. And hype becomes just a byproduct. Yeah.
Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, so for the pharmaceutical areas, I think actually Jessica put it pretty well. But if you're talking about manufacturing a very specific type of a dosage form, I would say Opricia is now hopefully on the way. I forget what it's called, a slope of productivity or something, where you are actually starting to get the benefit out of the other technology. If you're talking about personalized medicine and printing at home, it might be at the peak or on the way to the peak, where it'll actually go through some trot of disillusionment. But in terms of maybe gaining R&D productivity in the pharmaceutical industry, I actually start to see many pharmaceutical companies starting to embrace the rapid prototyping and the ability to accelerate the development cycle as being one of the potentially productive areas to pursue. So hopefully we are on the productive side of that curve.
Okay, for us, in the moment, we build up the department of additional manufacturing, and I think in the next 2-3 years, there we became the first customer projects, and then we will produce for the customers.
Okay, thank you.
We must think a little thing for the future. Now, 3D printing is a new technology, but in this pacing that I present, what happens if the prosthesis fails? The new state will be regenerative medicine and transplant. I think so. But there will be a big problem.
Thank you. Well, thank you. One last call for any questions for the audience because we're running out of time. Actually, we're out of time. Let's thank the speakers for their knowledge, insights, and time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.